All right. I'm extremely happy about this message. I think it will be a blessing for many, and I get to have a bit of story time, if you will, just talking to you guys and telling you guys what's going on here in the community, in the town where I'm from, and also just sharing, what happened to me yesterday on Palm Sunday, some pretty interesting stuff. And I felt the need to share what happened, the conversation that I had with a friend of mine, and that's what a lot of this message is going to be based upon is things going on and what happened yesterday with me. But the name of this message is going to be the Week of Palm Sunday. The Week of Palm Sunday. Now, you probably think you already know what this is about. It's just going to be a typical Palm Sunday message, but if you know me, you know, you know that's not the case. Nothing that I do is typical. A lot of times it just turns out that way. I don't know, but no, it's way different from your usual typical Palm Sunday message. It's just not the same thing. But yeah, so I'm excited about this, and let me say this: it's not even spelled the way you probably think that it's spelled. Instead of week, WEEK, like, 7 days a week, it's actually spelled WEAK, weak as in the opposite of strong. Also, Sunday is spelled SUNDAE, like an ice cream sundae instead of with an AY at the end, like the day Sunday. And also, even though palm is spelled correctly PALM, I don't mean it as in palm trees like we usually mean when we talk about Palm Sunday. It's referencing, in this sermon, it's referencing the palm of your hand. So it's basically a play on words. The name of this sermon is really just, it's punny. Not funny, but punny. It's just puns. It's just plays on words, if you will. And as I get into this, it'll make sense. So I want to start out in Exodus real quick. And I don't think this sermon will be very long of a message. I'm going to try to keep it kind of short and simple if possible. But I want to share some stuff in Exodus that I felt I should share, and then we're going to have a little bit of story time here in just a moment. But Exodus chapter 4, just going to read a handful of verses here. Starting at the beginning here in verse 1, it says this. Exodus 4 verse 1, it says, "And Moses answered and said, But, behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee." And we know what this is about. The chapter before this, Moses has that big moment of, the burning bush and going to check out the burning bush that's burning. It's on fire, but it's not being consumed. So he's amazed by this fire. And he goes and checks it out, and God is there. God is speaking to him. And God reveals to Moses that he wants to use him in a mighty way to free his people, to free the Israelites from the hands of the Egyptians that have kept them in slavery and in bondage. And he's revealing this stuff to him. And the thing about it is, Moses is just very like, I don't know about this. The people, they're not going to believe me. They're not going to listen to me. And he throws all these excuses out there as to why the people won't listen to him. And God just ignores the complaints. He just keeps reassuring him, don't worry, it'll play out the way it needs to. I got this. What God was trying to show Moses was this. What he was trying to show him was simply obey me, do what I say. And when you do your part, I'll do mine. I get that you can't do it all. I get that you can't convince everybody of everything. I'm not trying to get you to do more than what you can actually do or more than you can handle. There are simply things that I'm wanting you to do out of obedience. I'm using you as a bit of a mouthpiece, and I'm going to use you as a leader, and I'm going to use you to lead my people into their promised land. But I understand there's only so much you can do, but for the things that you can't do or the things that you can't do very well, what I need you to understand is I've got that covered. As long as you do what I'm saying, I will do what you can't do. I am a God that can do the impossible. I can do what man says can't be done. And when Moses even asked him, what do I call you? When I addressed these people, God said, I am, in capital letters, I am. And what God was saying was, listen, I'll be whatever it is that you need me to be. At that particular moment in time when you need me, I'll be what you need. I can be your joy. I can be your peace. I can be your rock, your solid foundation, your great physician. Whatever it is that you need me to be at that moment in your life, that's what I'll be. I'm simply, I am, the great I am. And so that's what's going on here. So we see starting out in this chapter, Moses is still going at it, saying, well, again, what if they don't listen? So he's still going on. Let's look at what God says to him. Verse 2, and the Lord said unto him, what is that in thine hand? And he said, a rod. And he said, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. Verse 5, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. And that's all I wanted to read from Exodus, and let me just kind of elaborate here on what's going on so you can get a good layout of this sermon and what it's going to be about. A couple of things happen here. A couple of interactions that God does with Moses. He starts out having him take a rod, and the rod becomes a serpent. And then he picks it back up, and that serpent turns back into a rod. And then there's another moment where he puts his hand in, pulls it back and puts it in, and when he pulls his hand back out, it's leprous, it's white as snow, and then he takes it back into his bosom, and when he looks at it again, it's back as his original flesh. It looks back how it's supposed to again. So I'm going over those two things, those two moments of interaction that God has with Moses to share a few things. One thing goes right back to what I just said a moment ago. He was showing him, because he was trying to explain it to him earlier, but now God is showing Moses that when you do what I say and you're obedient, I will do my part. Moses could not have turned that rod into a serpent. He wasn't a magician or a sorcerer or anything. He was just a regular old guy. But God caused that to happen, but he did it through his obedience. Even with the leprosy, the hand changing to be a different color, to be white as snow, that was not something that Moses could make happen. He just acted on what God said, and when he did it, then God did his end of the bargain. He did his part. So again, I'm emphasizing this, and there's a reason why. Earlier in this year, I did this little sermon series called A New Thing, and I was talking about God doing a new thing and bringing new beginnings this year for his people, doing great and mighty things, great and mighty works for his people. And I also mentioned that he would do things through his people. But the big emphasis I had on was what he was doing for people. And what this message is going to be a big part about is doing things through his people. Because as things are unfolding, and I'm about to talk about that here in just a moment, as things are starting to unfold and things are happening, God is moving and doing some things. We see that a big part of it is through people's obedience, people doing some things and then God picking up where they leave off and continuing to expand and do things that just confounds man. So that's what this is about when it comes to action. It's about doing your part and seeing the hand of God move and do his part. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize on was that second part, that second interaction with the leprosy. For those that don't know what leprosy is, it's a disease. It's a very contagious, life-threatening disease. It causes your skin to rot and to be very pale and to be really awkward and gross, and if it gets too out of hand, it'll cause your flesh to stink bad, and it's bad. And in the Old Testament, you can read about how it's something that's taken very, very serious compared to other types of illnesses and diseases, because people equated leprosy with sin. You know, if you had leprosy, you must have been a very sinful, spiritually filthy, unclean person. It was just assumed about you. The worst was assumed about you. And it was even to the point where if a person had leprosy, if they had to go out in public, which it would be a good thing to avoid doing that, but if a person that had to go out in public, they were supposed to warn people, hey, you know, be careful around me, I have leprosy. Even to the point where when people would be out in crowds or walking through, people would point at the person with leprosy and yell, unclean, unclean, that man is unclean. It was a big deal. So it had to be embarrassing to have leprosy. So he puts his hand out and it's leprous, but then the next time it's back to how it originally was, fresh and clean. And I'm saying that to say this should be a year of not only great and big things happening, but miraculous things, even miraculous healings, things that could not be fixed, things that could not be solved in people's lives, things that could not be healed, illnesses, diseases, all kinds of things, all kinds of problems that cannot be solved by man, or things that are really hard for man to solve, or things that people think would be impossible to fix, will be fixed, will be solved for a lot of people this year. And it all has to do with obedience, us doing our part, and then God stepping in and doing things that will confound man. So that was the thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to that second interaction. But going back to that first interaction with the rod, the rod and him putting it down and picking it back up and it turning into a serpent. If you remember, it started out with God asking Moses, what is that in your hand? Get it? The palm. What is it? What is in the palm of your hand right now? And I'm saying that to say this: what's going on with your hands? That's the big question in this series. I've talked about, like I said, doing works and doing things and being obedient to God. Well, a big part of it has to do with what's going on with your hands. What's going on with the palm of your hands this Palm Sunday? What's going on with your hands? What have you been doing? What have you been up to? Have you been up to good deeds, or have you been up to evil deeds? What has been playing out with your hands? Not just for everybody to see, but even behind the scenes. What have you been doing with your hands? That is going to be key in this. If you want to, go ahead and go to 1 Samuel chapter 5, and while you're going there, we're going to have a bit of story time. I'll tell you what happened to me yesterday. So yesterday was Palm Sunday, and of course, Palm Sunday, a lot of times in churches we celebrate a particular day that we see play out in the Bible, where Jesus is making his grand entrance into Jerusalem, and as he's coming in riding the donkey, there are people laying down the palm leaves from the palm trees, laying them down in front of him as he's going by, and people were shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna, and it was supposed to be this big thing where people are cheering him on, and you know, they're excited because they're acknowledging Jesus for who he is. But then you got other people people that are naysayers and blah blah blah, why are they cheering him on, blah blah blah. We know how it plays out. So yesterday, this is how my day went. Me and some friends, we had went to church, and it totally slipped my mind that it was even Palm Sunday. Because at church, the preacher, he did a message, and in it had really nothing to do with Palm Sunday. Usually, like I said, they'll talk about that particular story, or at least mention it. If they don't do a whole sermon on that story, they'll at least mention that story of the palm leaves and Hosanna, Hosanna, and all that. None of that happened in the sermon. And then even later that night, in the night sermon, we had a guest speaker, and he was talking about Zacchaeus and having Jesus come into his house and all that. I mean, we spoke nothing of that story. So it totally slipped my mind that it was supposed to be Palm Sunday. Wasn't even on my mind. So, like I said, we went to church, and we went out to eat, and it was just me and my buddy Bridget. Now, let me kind of backtrack to tell you what's been going on, and then I can tell you about the conversation we had yesterday on Palm Sunday. So, this friend of mine, Bridget, she's from here, but she left. She's moved around to different areas, and she came back like last year or the year before, something like that. She came back because God put it on her heart to do something with the homeless and to do things for the community here in this town that we live in. And earlier in the year, she received a job, a very amazing job, being over the women's battered women's shelter. You know what I'm trying to say. So as she's over this and she's doing all these things and making these changes and adjustments and bringing more people in to help and to interact, what she's wanting to do is expand, not just doing things for battered women, but also for homeless, of course, and also doing things for battered or homeless men. And she wants to do all these different projects, and she's trying to get people on board and get the grant money for this and that. I mean, she's really wanting to do all kinds of things, and she's got all these great ideas of things to help the community, and it's blowing her mind. And we were talking about this all last week and the week before, about how God is really moving. Like I said, he put it on her heart to do this, and he's putting things on other people's hearts. And the funny thing is, she's wanting to relocate, have a bigger building to do more things. And if you notice, here in town, you got a lot of businesses that are either relocating or just leaving altogether. And so there's a lot of, buildings that are not being used. And a lot of them are still in really good shape, can still be used. And so, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's a lot of changes that have started just out of nowhere, started happening this year. A lot of changes that people never thought they would really see. But they're trying to get more businesses in and things here in the town and create more job opportunities. But anyway, we were talking, and she was telling me about how, she's talking to all these people, and people are contacting her, talking to her about things and throwing ideas her way. And it's even to the point where there are people that we never really thought would care to help other people. And it's like God is just, he's pressing on people's hearts to be generous and to help out in ways. And even some of the most money hungry people and most controlling people in this town, and I won't name names, but there are some big names, big last names in this town who it seems like God is moving on them and really causing their hearts to be opened up to do things. And it's really mind-blowing at the speed that a lot of things are just playing out. It's crazy, and I can't go into too much detail and give too many names and things, but it's mind-blowing. But yeah, he's really moving. He's moving on people's hearts. People are having mind changes. They're changing their mind about how they view things and how they want to be good or not be good to people and stuff. They're really getting on board with some things, and she's finding favor with people she never thought she'd have favor with, but it's all because of the favor that she has with God for being obedient. So as she's doing her part, God's doing his, and he's moving. But yesterday we were talking after church. It was just me and her in the car talking, and we were, having a conversation, and she was just really venting to me and just pouring out. And, she has such a heart for the women that come in who, maybe they've been abused, whether physically abused, sexually abused, mentally abused, just flat out homeless or whatever. These women coming in and their families coming in, and, this past week was a very stressful week for her. I won't go into too many details, but she was just sharing with me some things, and it's been rough, and she's really had to give some things over to God. She's really had to, and she was explaining to me about how there was this one moment where she started to get stressed out because she had a lot on her plate already, and there was somebody that was really causing her some trouble, and she just said in her mind, God, you got to help me with this, and the Holy Spirit spoke to her and gave her the words of what she needed to say to those particular people at that particular time. And so God is really helping her out, and it's just amazing. But one of the things that she's been doing is bringing, not forcing, but those that want to go, she's been helping them get to church, and we've been going to church together. And we had one woman that's new to the shelter, really quiet, really shy, and she went to church with us, and she was brought up in a home where they just didn't believe in God at all. So a lot of things are new to her, and it was kind of overwhelming for her at first. But then last night, she was up, and she was kind of into the music and clapping and singing, and she was kind of opening up and breaking out of her shell just a little bit, and it was just a blessing. But like I said, Bridget, she's been telling me all these things, and she was telling me about how it's heartbreaking for her. She feels privileged and honored to be a part of everything that God's doing, but it's heartbreaking when she hears the stories of some of these women that come in, but it's blowing her mind how God is using her and what she's got going on to help people. And it all ties into what I've been saying. Sure, some of these people that come in are Christians, but some of them are people who don't believe in God, or who really haven't had the opportunity to learn much about him. And I've said before that this will be a year not only for God's people, but a year of God drawing in more to the flock. Those who weren't originally of him, he's pulling them in, getting those whosoevers. That's something that I've been talking about. Did a sermon called that, whosoever. He's getting those whosoevers. So he's using the whosoevers, whosoever will be obedient to him and obey him. But he's pulling in those who would seek him, who would have the open heart to receive him if possible. So he's pulling people in that were not part of the flock. He's pulling them in, and he's gathering more people at a rapid rate, and he's using people to draw more people in. And but anyway, but she was even going on about how even people from different towns, different states are God is making things play out to where people end up being led to that shelter to meet her, from completely different areas. And, even having people from another country, there for a while. And it's mind blowing. But she was sitting there, and she was just venting to me, and she's telling me all these things. And I said, as you're telling me all this stuff, it makes me think of some things. It makes me think of something that you told me. I said, if you remember some years ago when you and I first started going to church together, and we were, really getting serious about God and everything, You would tell me stories of how you would just be so angry at God. You would be so upset with God because there were so many things that you didn't understand, and you just felt kind of like God just wasn't hearing you. Like, what you were saying didn't matter to God in a way. You just felt so distant from him, and you were questioning so many things, and you were so angry with how some things had played out in your life, and so on and so forth. And you were telling me about how you would just get so angry and lash out at God and everything, but he still drew you in. He still tugged at those heartstrings. He still had this desire to have a relationship with you. Because, like you've said, you've always thought it was all about religion, but it was about relationship. And that was the thing that God kept trying to get you to see, was that he was trying his best to have a relationship with you. And in the process of that, then he would work on you on the things that needed to be worked on. You had had all these years, you had had this mindset, this perception of who God was. And it's a perception that a lot of people have, that he's just this mean, angry tyrant. He's just a God that's just evil and just, he just doesn't care about his people, and he wants bad for his people, and all he wants to do is punish people all the time. But in reality, he's a loving father. He is an amazing God that wants the best for his people. He's an outstanding father. He loves his children. And he wants a relationship. It's not just about being religious and getting it right all the time. He is trying to get you to want to have that relationship with him, that one-on-one relationship, where it's not all about being perfect to get into heaven. It's about really knowing him, not just knowing of Jesus, but knowing him on a personal level. And I was just like, you've gone through all that, and seeing how you've come out on the other end, and it's no coincidence that God is using you. I said, you just recently talked about how you had all these suddenly moments where one moment you would want to do something and you would just go after it, and you would have this type of a job and this type of a job and that type of a job over the years. And after all these years of having all those different types of careers that you had, all those careers ended up coming together to help you in what you're doing now, because all those things you did in the past are helping you now. They're giving you the knowledge and understanding that you need for this particular job that you have. So not only the things that you did in your past all come together now to benefit you, to help you in this job, but the personal experiences that you've had and the things that you've gone through spiritually and your spiritual growth with God is helping you now, because it's almost like God is saying, okay, what I want to do is I want to use you, if you'll let me, and you're being an open vessel. I want to use you to help others who have gone through similar things that you've gone through in your past. You've gone through some rough times. You've sought after me. You've got a relationship with me. And now I'm going to draw people in to this shelter, whether it be people of me, people not of me, but I'm drawing them in so that you can minister to them. See where I'm going with this? To minister to them and to help them in ways that some other people might not be able to help them, because they might not know what to say. But he's giving you the words. The Holy Spirit is giving you the words and the things and the knowledge to say what you need to say to these people, to help them, to draw them to him. So he's using you to help them get out of their bad situations and to help them have a new beginning, a new start, a new thing in their life. But you're also drawing them to me, because you know what to say to help them. You can say, hey, I understand what you're going through. I've been through it. Let me help you. Let me draw you and lead you to God the way I've been led. So, and I was just explaining that, and I was saying all this stuff that was just coming to me. I mean, it was just coming to me, and I was just saying it, and it was like I was ministering to her at the moment after she just got done ministering to somebody else. And it just happened. It just came to me. And we're sitting there, and she's just crying, breaking down in tears. And it was just a really awesome moment. And, you know, I went, I came here in the house and she went home. And we went to church again that night, last night. And we were going to go eat again before finally going home, calling it a night. And she asked me, she was like, where do you want to eat? And the thing that kept coming to me was ice cream, and ice cream cake and ice cream sundae. That was the thing that kept coming to me. Now, again, I'm not thinking anything about the fact that it's Palm Sunday. It has totally left my mind. Like I said, we didn't have sermons about it in church like you would think, so it was not on my mind at all. But the thing that I kept thinking was, man, ice cream and ice cream sundae from Sonic. That sounds good. We should go to Sonic. We should go to Sonic. And from the time we left the church, from then all the way to her dropping everybody else off and everything, that was the thing that kept playing in my mind. So when she asked me, I was gonna say Sonic, so that we could get some ice cream. Well, I asked her if she was hungry, and she said yeah, and I was like, well, I'm very hungry too. So even though something in me is saying go and get some ice cream sundaes, my mind's trying to rationalize it, and I'm thinking, well, we're both really hungry. It's been a long day. We should probably get an actual meal, not just ice cream. We need something that's going to fill us up. So I said, let's go eat Mexican. So as some of you that are from around here, you know that there's like 3 Mexican restaurants here in this town. So I'm thinking, let's go to the one furthest out. Let's go to El Puente. Well, we get there, and they were closing, and it was like they were closing way earlier than usual. So we were like, okay. So I was like, well, I guess we'll go to the next closest one. Let's go to Mi Pueblito. Now, this Mexican restaurant is the one that's in the little mall that we have, the Village Mall. And I call it a small because it's kind of small to be really considered a mall. No disrespect, I shop there. There's just not very many places to shop at, so it's kind of more of a small than a mall, but you get what I'm saying. So I was like, let's go there. So we get out of the car and we're walking up. Now, you got the restaurant, but beside it you have a dollar store, Dollar General, because like I said, it's like a little mall. So as we're walking up, Bridget goes, hey, don't let me forget, when we get done eating, I got to go over here to the dollar store, and I've got to get some cat litter for my cats. I'm like, okay. So we go in, we eat Mexican, we get done, we walk out, and we start making our way next door. Well, she goes up to the door and she pulls on it, and they had just locked it. But one of the people in there decided, I'm going to go ahead and let them in. So she comes and she unlocks the door, and she's like, hey, if y'all hurry up, you can go ahead and come in and get something. So we were like, okay. And this isn't a coincidence how it's playing out like this, how we, didn't get to eat at the one, and then we go to the one that has the dollar store beside it. Not a coincidence. It was supposed to play out that way. Not a coincidence that she decided to go ahead and open the door up for us. It all played out how it was supposed to. So check this out. So we go in there, and she's walking fast because, we're trying to hurry up. She finds the aisle with the cat food, cat litter. She gets the cat litter. We go up to the register. So we're standing there. I'm standing behind her. And, she's just paying for that. And I'm looking around. And I just so happen to look over to my right. Now, the way it's set up is there's this register, and then you've got, some walkway. And then you've got some aisles going, parallel right here, some aisles. Okay, so when I looked straight to my right, there were these 2 aisles that I'm seeing down, that I can see down. And of course, all the way down up against the wall is the freezers for like whatever stuff that they want to keep cold or frozen. So since there's these aisles going this way, I can't see all of what's going all down the wall of freezers. I can only see that one particular freezer that's straight ahead, and what they had in that particular one was ice cream. Different types of ice creams, right? So, like I said, I wasn't, looking for ice cream. It had slipped my mind at this moment to even go get ice cream. But I just so happened to look, and I see the freezer with all the ice cream in it. And the very first thing that my mind or that my eyes focuses on is the blue box that said drumsticks. So I go up to the freezer. Now, again, in my mind, I'm trying to rationalize it. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't really spend money on ice cream. But I'm still walking anyway. My mind is saying one thing, but something in me is like, no, go get this ice cream. It's going to make sense later. Just get the ice cream. So I'm like, okay. So I go and I get the box of what's called drumsticks ice cream. It's like the ice cream cone, but then it's got the ice cream down in it, but then it's got the chocolate, and then it's got the peanuts on it. It'll make sense in a moment. Some of y'all probably already get where I'm going, but just bear with me. So I go and I get it, and I hurry up and get behind her. So when she gets done paying for her kitty litter, I put the box up there and I pay for it, and I get home, and I put the drumsticks up in the freezer. So, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, why do I still not have a sermon for this week? Because a lot of times I'll get it, days before I'm supposed to record it or something. And I'm just like, and it was like some things were there in my mind, but I knew I didn't have all of it. And I still couldn't understand why. And I'm thinking, well, usually, a lot of times I might have 2 sermons a week. And a lot of times the first one either gets recorded either Sunday or Monday. But, usually I would have it by now. And I'm just thinking, what, and I knew it had something to do with the palm of the hand. But I didn't have all of it in my mind at the time. I just knew it had to do with your hands and what you do with your hands. So I had some of it, but I knew I didn't have all of it. I didn't even have the title for it. So I'm thinking, why, So anyway, I'm sitting there, I'm on Facebook, and somebody posted this picture. And it was a hand, and it had just some ice cream sitting on it. Somebody put a scoop of ice cream in the palm of their hand, and they had the little chocolate and the sprinkles or whatever it had on it. But it was basically like a sundae sitting in the palm of somebody's hand. And underneath it said Palm Sundae, but it was spelled Sunday like an ice cream sundae with an E at the end instead of a Y. And it kind of tickled me. I was like, I'm going to share that. That's cool. Still hadn't completely registered to me yet what's going on. But God's like dropping little hints and, So I shared that. And then finally it hit me. Palm Sunday. I was like, oh yeah, Palm Sunday. And then I was like, oh, Palm Sunday. The palm of the hand, and so I'm like, okay, I get it now. It's starting to make sense. So slowly, I'm getting some stuff. So then I'm thinking, man, I want some ice cream again. Let me go in here and get one of these drumsticks. So I get a drumstick. I'm sitting there eating it. And while I'm eating it, because I got it in my hand, because it's not like a tub of ice cream where you got to hold it with both hands or sit it in your lap. No, you got to hold it in the palm of your hand and eat it. So while I'm eating this, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is actually an ice cream sundae. It's just in a cone, but it's easier to have it in the palm of your hand. You can hold it with one hand, unlike an actual container, you know what I mean, or a plate that you kind of have to hold or balance out. You just hold it, and it's even got the right ingredients. It's not just like, different flavor ice creams or just a regular ice cream cone, just a cone with the ice cream. It's the cone, and it's got the ice cream, but it's got the chocolate, and it's got the nuts on it, just like on a sundae. And and all of a sudden, the whole sermon just came to me right at that moment, and I was just like, oh my God, he's been dropping all these hints to me, and it's just now hitting me. And all these verses and all the things that I needed to talk about all started coming to me, and it all made sense. Palm Sunday. That's why he kept putting it in me to go get the ice cream, because he was giving it to me, but I kept trying to rationalize it like, oh no, I don't need ice cream. But he was giving me the sermon, but it wasn't registering at the moment. And finally I'm sitting there eating, and I'm just like, it's a drumstick, but really all it is a sundae that you hold in your hand. And then I'm just like, oh my gosh, but yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I get it. Okay, I got it. So it's all coming to me. And I'm thinking, okay, Palm Sunday, and I'll spell it like the ice cream sundae, but it's weird that I would be getting it now because, it makes sense to get it now, but if I'm going to record it and post it tomorrow, Monday, it'll be weird talking about Palm Sunday on Monday. It'll already be over. And then the thing that came to me was the conversation that we had yesterday and the things that we had been talking about all throughout yesterday, which is the stuff I just got done explaining to you. So I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense now that I would talk about it Monday because I wouldn't have had all the stuff I need to talk about prior to Sunday because I got to talk about the conversations I had today, Sunday, something. And okay, so yeah, it does kind of make sense that I wouldn't be able to talk about it till Monday. Makes sense. I was like, but it's still going to be weird calling it that. And then the thing that came to me was the week of Palm Sunday. And I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense because it's later in the week, so the week of Palm Sunday. And then at that moment, the next thing hit me, which was, don't spell it week like W-E-E-K, spell it W-E-A-K. Because if you remember in the conversation, and this is what's playing out in my mind, if you remember in that conversation that you had with Bridget, she was talking about just feeling tired and weak, but how she was drawing her strength from me. Get it? The week of Palm Sunday. So it's the week. This is the week of Palm Sunday. But also it's about the weak, those who are weak but find strength in God when they're obedient to Him. The week of the palm of your hand. What are you doing with your palms? What are you doing with your hands? The week of Palm Sunday. Get it? Yeah. I don't know, guys. Y'all know me. God just gives me wacky ways of explaining stuff, but I dig it because I'm a wacky person, so it all adds up. Yeah. The humor of God. I always tell people God has a sense of humor, and people think I'm just weird, but anyway. So, that probably seemed like a long story, but evidently somebody was supposed to get something out of it. Maybe you needed to hear that God has a sense of humor. Maybe you needed to hear that, yes, God is moving. Maybe you've questioned, well, what is God really doing if He's really supposed to be doing something for us? Yes, He's moving. Things are happening. This is just the start of it. There's more to come all throughout this year. So maybe you needed to hear that God is moving. Maybe you needed to hear that it is about obedience and the crucifying of the flesh, sometimes dealing with things you don't have to deal with, or interacting with people that give you a hard time, or the challenges, like I talked about, going through challenges and getting out of your comfort zone in order to be able to be used by God to bring in more people. Maybe you needed reassurance that God really is after the whosoevers, whether it be people of His flock or whether it be about bringing more into the fold, things that I've been talking about. So maybe somebody needed some type of confirmation, whatever, but somebody or some people were supposed to get something out of the story I just gave you. So it might not mean nothing to some of you, but somebody listening needed to hear either some or all of what I just said in that story of what happened yesterday. So for whoever needed it, there you go. So now moving on with the rest of the sermon, and I'm going to try to get through this quick. The next couple of areas I'm just going to go through quickly, not going to spend too much time in them because it's stuff I've gone over numerous times. So if you listen to me often, it'll be stuff that sounds familiar, but there's something I need to pull from the text. So 1 Samuel chapter 5, starting here at verse 1, it says, "And the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer unto Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And when they of Ashdod arose early on the morrow, behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. And they took Dagon and set him in his place again. And when they arose early on the morrow morning, behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both the palms of his hands were cut off upon the threshold. Only the stump of Dagon was left to him. What's going on here, simply put, is you have the ark of God in the Old Testament. It was a representation of the presence of God. So wherever the ark was, there was God's presence. The ark belonged to the Israelites, God's chosen people. The Philistines took it. They brought it to their camp. And what they did was they put it in the temple of Dagon. Dagon was a false god. It was the god that they worshiped. So they had the ark of the one true God in the same area as this idol, this false god, this image or this statue of this false god named Dagon. And when they go in there, the statue of Dagon was falling over. So they prop it back up. They leave. They come back to this temple again. And not only is Dagon knocked down, but then the head and the palms of the hands, right? Here we are with the palms of the hands. The head and the palms of the hands are detached. So we see that there. Now, real quick, go with me to 2 Kings. It'll make sense why I mentioned that. Just bear with me for a moment. I got this theme going on with the palms of the hands. 2 Kings chapter 9, starting at verse 30, and I'm just going to read some of this real quick. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tarred her head and looked out a window. And as Jehu entered in at the gate, she said, Had Zimri peace, who slew his master? And he lifted up his face to the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? And there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs. And he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trode her underfoot. And when he was come in, he did eat and drink, and said, Go, see now this cursed woman, and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. And they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Again, not going to go too far into detail, because if you listen to me enough, you already know. But we know who Jezebel is. She was a wicked woman. She was a woman of witchcraft. She was big on control, manipulation, deceit. That was her thing. And what she ended up doing was she caused a lot of trouble for God's people, especially God's prophets, those that were supposed to speak a word from God. All she wanted to do was shut them down, shut them up, scare them to death, intimidate them, whatever she could do to have control over that area, over the people of that area. Either you're going to be on my side, or I'm going to shut you up. Either you're going to do things my way and give me what I want, or I'm going to cause you trouble. I'm going to have you killed. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's how she was. And so what played out was this. Here in the text, here comes Jehu. He's not taking any crap from her. He's coming to put his foot down. She's wanting to know if he's coming in peace. Blah, blah, blah. But he ain't having it. He ain't coming in peace. He's coming in the name of the Lord to shut this wicked woman down, to stop her nonsense, to end her reign. And what happens is he's saying, who is on my side? Who? But what he was really saying was, who is on the Lord's side? Who? Because he was coming in the name of the Lord. He's saying, who is on God's side? Are you on her side, or are you on God's? You can't serve both, and you can no longer be caught between two opinions. So 2 or 3 eunuchs flipped her out of the window, and she falls down to her death. And it's saying that what ends up happening is the only thing that's left is the skull, the feet, and the palms of her hands, because she would be eaten up by the dogs. And that's what would be left, was the head, the feet, and the palms of the hands. So here's the point that I wanted to make with this and what I just read to you in 1 Samuel. In 1 Samuel, you had Dagon, who was a false god. He was an idol. Here in this text, we have Jezebel, who caused people to worship false gods and false idols, but also in the process, she made an idol out of herself. Because you had people of God who were so afraid of her that they were hiding in caves, if you remember. They were hiding in caves and being scared to come out that they might be found. So they were putting her over God. They were fearing her more than they were fearing God. So Dagon is an idol. Jezebel caused people to worship false idols and ended up making an idol out of herself. So I'm saying that to say this. First of all, you got to understand, and I know I've talked about this before, but this is a final warning for some folks. If you have any idols, it is very important for you to lay them down. Let it go. The palms of the hands, what I want to get at with that is this. Those hands were cut off. And if you have an issue with idolatry, if you have an issue with putting what people say over what God says, going along with what people do, regardless of what God is trying to do with you, there will be a price to pay. You don't want your hands symbolically, so to speak, cut off from what God has to offer you. He will cut off your idols from getting access to what he has and for what he's going to do for people this year. But he will cut off your hands or your ability, not literally cut them off, but cut off your access to grab something, to touch some things, to grab a hold of some blessings, because all you're going to do is take those things and run it into the ground, because you're not going to be used by him. You're not going to use your hands for the works of God the way it needs to be done. You're going to do things for your benefit, or you're going to use things for your idol. You're going to say, well, God gave me this to do this and that with my hands with, but my idol is over here suggesting that I do this, and this. So because you will not take what God has for you serious, it will not be put into your hands if you have an idol, because that idol will drive you to do things with these blessings and do things with these people you shouldn't be doing. Your idol will cause you to use your hands the wrong way with what God is trying to put in your hands, with what God is trying to present to you. It's kind of like that saying, it goes something like idle hands are the devil's workshop or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? What's going on with your hands? You need fresh, clean hands. You don't need to be red-handed, like when they say being caught red-handed. You don't want blood on your hands. He doesn't like hands that shed innocent blood, the word says. What's going on with your hands? Because if you're not careful, your hands will be cut off, so to speak, from accessing what could and should be yours, all because you won't drive that idol away. Because that idol will cause you to use your hands to destroy the blessing, to run it into the ground, to run it amok. But just finishing this, verse 36, it says, wherefore they came again and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the portion of Jezreel shall dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. The flesh being ate up. The fleshly parts of her, not the skull and not the feet or the palms of the hands where it's bony and hard. No, the fleshly would be eaten up. And what I'm getting at here is this: flesh should be crucified. Listen, your flesh has to be set aside. Personal agenda has to be moved out of the way. things sometimes that will please your flesh and make you feel good sometimes has to be set aside, because if not, it'll be crucified in a way that you don't want it to be. It is important that you don't let flesh get in the way of what it is that God has for you. And here in verse 37, where it's talked about her carcass being as dung upon the face of the earth, Jezebel was somebody who was very full of herself. She was very arrogant, very prideful, very full of herself. You could say she was a crappy person. So if she was full of herself and she was a crappy person, another thing you could say was she was full of crap. And sure enough, her fleshliness, right, where she's full of crap, full of herself, her fleshliness would be dung upon the face of the earth, or dookie, or crap, upon the face of the earth. In other words, if you are somebody who causes folks to make an idol out of you, you cause people to put what you think and what you say before what God thinks and what God says, you're actually setting yourself up to be exposed for who you really are. You're going to cause yourself to be exposed to be somebody that basically people will find out that you're not who you've made yourself out to be. You're not as amazing and wonderful as you've made yourself out to be. You're not as sweet and kind and loving and caring as you've made yourself out to be. Or you're not as strong and bold and powerful and just great as you've made yourself out to be. You may have made yourself out to be a type of person in front of folks, while really you've been a wolf in sheep's clothing behind the scenes. But if you are not careful, you are treading on a territory at the moment where you will be exposed for who you really are, and all you're doing is setting yourself up to, again, not be able to access what will be right in front of you. You've waited, you've doubted, this and that, but when the manifestation hits in your life, you won't be able to fully touch or access it, because your hands will be cut off, if you will. Isaiah, real quick. Isaiah chapter 49. Starting at verse 13, it says this: Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, and break forth into singing, O mountains, for the Lord hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. So here we are with singing and having praise. That was a theme that I had going on earlier in the year, praising your way to victory. But let's keep looking. But Zion said, the Lord hath forsaken me, and my Lord hath forgotten me. And that's something that people might be thinking right now as we're waiting for things to take place in people's lives. We see it playing out, but there are still more people that will be soon affected by this chain reaction that's taking place right now. But there are people that have the mindset of, why is God leaving me out? Why is he forsaking me? But you must understand, the word lets us know that God will never leave us or forsake us. Verse 15, it says this: Can a woman forget her suckling child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, but yet will I not forget. Other people may forget about you, but God is saying here, I have not forgotten about you, and I will not. Even when others do, even when others don't care, or even when people pretend to care, but they really don't, I do, I really do, and I always will care. Verse 16, Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me. He said, I have you graven on the palms of my hands. He has you in the palm of his hand. And I'm saying that to say this, to ask you this: what is in the palm of your hand? What should be in the palm of your hand is the Word of God. Something that should continuously be in your hand is the book, the Bible, whether it be in an actual book form, or maybe you got a Bible app on your phone like what I'm using right now, or whatever. You need the Word in your hand. That's something that you must continually try to have in your hand is the word of God. So just like how God has you in his hand, you should have him in your hand. Why? Because in the beginning was the word. The word was with God and the word was God, right? Word with a capital W, Jesus. Get it? Because the Bible is the living word, because Jesus is our new and living covenant, the one true living God, because it's all the same. So just like how he has you in the palm of his hand, you should have him in the palm of your hand. So God, the things of God, working out in the palms of your hands. But there are things that don't need to be in the palm of your hands. It is very important that not only should you want to lay down your idols, but even things that hinder you from fully pursuing the will of God in your life. You might have to put a beer bottle down sometimes. You're probably going to have to put that needle down and stop shooting up and getting high. Maybe you've got to put the drugs down. There are things that you might have in your hand that you might need to put down, that you might need to throw away, that you might want to pour out in the sink, that you might want to flush down the toilet, that you might want to completely get rid of for good. Sometimes there are things in your hand that don't need to be in your hand, that take you out of the presence of God. So as you have God in your hands, you also need to be careful about what you put in your hands. It's not good to let people touch your hands and put curses on your hands and do these palm readings and things like that. It's not time for that. If you want to know what your future holds, you need to go to the one, oh my goodness, you need to go to the one that knows the beginning from the end, because he is the first, last, beginning, and the end, the Alpha and Omega. And there are no gods that have come before him, and none will come after him. So he's probably the one that you need to go to about your future. Go with me to Joel. Joel chapter 2. Verse 21, it says, "Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things." Here we are with God doing mighty, awesome, great works. Verse 22, "Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring." Give me just a second here. Being texted. Really? Here we are. 22, "Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring, for the tree beareth her fruit, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength." Now, let me say, obviously, we know the context of where it says spring, the wilderness do spring, things springing forth, things birthing out and growing and springing out. But when I read this, that particular word really popped out to me, because, of course, we know we just had the first day of spring for this year. Now, obviously, it's talking about a different context of spring, springing forth, but again, it all ties in together because this is a play on words. As we see in the title of this message, the Weak of Palm Sundae, it's a play on words. It's humor used to make a point. So it's not a coincidence that we are now at the start of spring, and we moved our clocks forward some days ago to spring forward, as we call it. And then here we are talking, or he's talking about things springing forth. This is all tying in together to help you see the big picture that as we are moving forward and springing into action in spring, there are new things springing up, new beginnings, new starts popping up. Suddenly, a lot of suddenlies going on. Verse 23, be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. Funny thing about that is, I just recently re-recorded a sermon called 789 New Beginnings. And it was a message, part 3 of the series, A New Thing, that I did earlier this year. And when I recorded it, I had only put it on audio because this was right before I started putting my sermons on video. So I re-recorded that particular sermon to put on video. And that was the last thing that I've done prior to this message. And I ended that message talking about, former and latter rain and former and latter glory. And here it is popping up in this sermon. Moving on. 24, and the floor shall be full of wheat, and the fats shall overflow with wine and oil. Now listen to this. Last verse I want to read from this area in Joel. This is a verse you hear people quote, preach it all the time when talking about restoration. In other words, at a time where God is going to give back to you the things that the enemy has stolen or tried to steal, him giving you an abundance of blessings. And sure, it makes sense to bring this verse up to quote it, but really I wasn't planning on using this verse because it's used so much, and I don't want to overuse it, but something stood out to me when I read it. Did anybody find something interesting in verse 25? Let's read it. It says, and I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, that the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. So he's saying, I want to restore all that the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm ate up. I want to restore to you what has been taken from you. Anybody see anything that just stands out there? Look at what type of worm it says. A palm worm. A palmer worm. Palm. Palmer worm. Get it? Palm of your hand. A palmer worm. Right? Because this is supposed to be a play on words. Palm Sunday, like the palm trees, but I've been talking about the palm of the hand, and now you have a worm called the palmer worm. Yeah. So when I noticed it, I was like, yep, I'm going to read this verse. I was like, yeah. Didn't want to use it because it's overused all the time. And I'm just like, everybody says this verse. And I'm like, nope, just going to go ahead and read it anyway because, hey, palmer worm. So yes, restoration, a year of restoration for many. And finally, the last area I want to go to is the book of John. Just a few verses in here and I'll be done. John 18. John chapter 18 starting at verse 19. We know what's going on here. We know Judas sold Jesus out. And the people came to capture Jesus and take him away. And they're toying around with him and playing around with him and being really rude to him before setting him up to be crucified. And let's look at this. Verse 19, it says, the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort. And in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me. What I have said unto them, behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? What's going on here is this. And let me say this before I explain it. Let me say this. There's a couple of other gospels that go over this, and they go on to let us know that all the people that were messing with Jesus, they were doing stuff like spitting on him and talking trash to him. One of the gospels says that they were buffeting Jesus with the palm of their hands. Some say they were what was it, striking him with the palm of their hand or something like that. But they used different words talking about him, talking about them hitting Jesus with the palm of his hand in some kind of way. Smiting, that's what the word was, smiting. So buffeting and smiting him with the palm of their hands. So they're smacking him around and toying with him. And it even goes on to let us know that they would do stuff like blindfold them and hit them with the palm of their hand and say, okay, if you're really this amazing prophet, then prophesy and tell us which one of us was the one that hit you and stuff like that. They were really toying with them. But the reason why I decided to read it from this particular gospel, John, is because of this particular scenario that it mentions, where a certain person in particular hits Jesus with the palm of his hand and goes on to say, why, how dare you respond to the high priest the way that you have? And what I'm getting at is this. What happens here is they're questioning Jesus, and a high priest asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. In other words, there's somebody questioning Jesus, not just anybody, but a high priest questioning Jesus on his doctrine. In other words, the things that he teaches, his sayings, his beliefs. He's being questioned. And Jesus responds, hey, listen, I've been saying this stuff over and over. I've been repeating myself. I've taught it in the synagogues. I've taught it out in the open, in public. These people all over have heard me. If you want to know, just ask them. You guys make me out to be a liar anyway. You're not going to listen to what I have to say anyway. So why not just ask any of these numerous people what I've been saying? And so somebody gets offended that Jesus responded to the high priest in the way that he did. So he hits Jesus with the palm of his hand and basically saying, how dare you respond to him that way? Shouldn't you respond better to him? He's a high priest after all. Now, here's the thing. We should know that Jesus is the great high priest, just like how he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's the Lamb of Lambs because he was the ultimate lamb that paid the price for us. So it only makes sense that he would be the priest of priests, the great high priest. So really, Jesus is on a higher priestly level than whoever this high priest is. Doesn't matter who he is, Jesus is higher. His ways, his thoughts, and his teachings are above and greater and higher than this person. But what we see happening here, if you think about it, and I just realized this when going over this for this message, is this is a bit of idolatry, because this guy is basically saying to Jesus, this high priest is over you. He's greater than you. You are under him because he's a high priest. See, he's not acknowledging Jesus as being the great high priest, priest of all priests. He's just like, no, this guy, he's a high priest. How dare you respond to him that way? So he's putting this person, this man, over God in the flesh. Idolatry. And not only is he doing it over anything, but he's doing it over doctrine, over teaching, over what he believes to be right, or rather what Jesus knows to be correct. So he's saying, listen, you're supposed to be submitting to him. And he dares to hit Jesus because of it with the palm of his hand. You have to understand, and whoever this is for, please get this. You must understand that if God is showing you something, if he's giving you revelation upon something, it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter if the majority says something different. In fact, it doesn't matter how high up, right? Because he was a high priest. It doesn't matter how high on the totem pole somebody else is, even if they are a priest. If God has shown you something, if God has revealed to you something to be true, it doesn't matter if it lines up with the doctrine of man. What God says goes. No one else is high enough to be higher than God. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if people won't like it. It doesn't matter if you're going to be outnumbered on an issue. Hello? Are you looking at the... Come on. Listen, I don't care if you don't agree. I'm not forcing you to believe what I believe, but you must understand I'm going with what was revealed to me. So whatever you are going through, whoever it is that's out there watching this video, whoever it is, if this is for you, you must understand that whatever it is that God has shown to you, whatever it is that God is revealing to you, whatever God is trying to get you to see, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. What God says, listen, God's ways are higher than man's. His thoughts are higher than man's. That's all there is to it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no loophole. There's no way around it. But the thing that he did, not only did he disagree, and not only did he try to make Jesus feel like what somebody else said goes, not only was it on all things doctrine, teachings, but then he hit him with the palm of his hand. There's an expression that we use called slapping somebody in the face. Of course, we actually slap people, but there's an expression that goes, you slap me in the face. And usually what people mean when they say that is a slap in the face. That's how they say it. That was a slap in the face. What they usually do is when they say it, they mean that you kind of did them wrong. Almost kind of like when we use that expression, stabbing somebody in the back. It doesn't really mean you took a knife and stabbed them in the back. It just means that you were one way to their face, and then when they were turned away from you, or you were somewhere behind closed doors, you did things against them in secret, so you stabbed them in the back, so to speak. When you do a slap in the face to somebody, that expression, it's like saying you really did them wrong, but you did them wrong suddenly and in a surprising way. That's why when people say it, they usually have a shocked look on their face. Like, for example, let's say two people are talking, and person A looks at person B and says, hey, that person that you thought were your buddy, they said this behind your back, or they did that, and that. You thought, they were for you, but they've been doing this, and this. And then person B goes, man, that's a slap in the face. And they say it with a surprised look on their face, like, man, that's just a slap in the face. And then they go to that person, why'd you do that, man? That's such a slap in the face. What was that about? Because it was something surprising and sudden that just catches the person off guard. Man, that was rude. That was just a slap in the face. What I'm saying to you is this. That man, when he hit Jesus with the palm of his hand, it was like a slap in the face. Literally. But I'm using that to say to you metaphorically. What are you doing that is a slap in the face of God? What are you doing that is like an insult to God, a sudden, out of nowhere insult? In other words, maybe 1 minute you're on track with God, you're doing good, then all of a sudden you just turn your back on him and you go completely against him. You make God think he can trust you and that you're really on his side, but then when the heat comes up, right, and you're outnumbered, or somebody disagrees with you, oh no, disagreements, right, because it's such a scary thing, then all of a sudden you give in. Sometimes there ain't even temptation to give in to. You just give in just because you're scared of what might happen. You don't even let a chance happen of something breaking loose. You don't even give an opportunity for something to happen before something even happens. You just, oh, well, and you just turn from God, and it's just like a sudden slap in the face to God. What are you doing that is such a slap in the face, like you just smacking God in the face with the palm of your hand, so to speak? Of course, you're not literally doing it, but what is it that you're doing that is a slap in the face to God? Could it be something like what this guy's doing? Slapping God, literally slapping God, Jesus, God in the flesh, in the face, all because he doesn't like the fact that he was taken out of his comfort zone. because there's a disagreement on doctrine? Uh-oh. What are you doing that is a slap in the face to God? You're serving him. You're all about him until some little issue comes up. And all of a sudden, you're quick to just turn your back on God. Okay, God, I'll speak what it is that you want me to say, just like the prophets who were hiding in the caves from Jezebel. Okay, God. Next thing you know, they get a little threat from Jezebel. That she just threatens them, and now they're all hiding out in the cave. And then Obadiah's got to come and bring them food and water because they don't want to exit the cave in case they get seen and something happens to them. Now, they outnumber Jezebel by the hundreds probably, but they're still hiding out. See what I'm saying? See how it just doesn't even make sense why it even played out like that? What are you doing that's, and you gotta understand, that has to be a slap in the face to God right there. All them prophets hiding in the cave against one woman, just simply spewing out threats. And some of the other people following her, they're unsure of themselves too. They're just going along with it because they see somebody else doing it. That's why when Elijah called them out and said, why are y'all caught between two opinions? They can't even answer the question. They're just looking around like, I'm not sure how to answer this question. You're making a good point, but I'm scared to agree with what you're saying. So I'm just looking around at what everybody else is doing. What are you doing that's such a huge slap in the face to God when he's been so good to you and want to do more things for you, but you just deny him suddenly and in such a rude way out of nowhere, a sudden slap in the face to God? Whatever it is that you're doing, put your hands down. The only time you raise your hands up around God is if you're praising him. Otherwise, don't be slapping God in the face. Put down your idols. Put down anything else that's not of God. Get your hands free so that you can not be caught red-handed, so that you can have clean hands that do not shed innocent blood, so that you can grasp a hold of and receive and touch the manifestation when it appears. I'm going to pray us out of here. Heavenly Father, I thank you for another time to minister another word. I'm thankful for this message. Thankful for the week of Palm Sunday. Those that are weak but are made strong in you, Lord, because of what's in the palm of their hands. You. Lord, I love you. I thank you. I give you the praise, glory, and honor. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.